everyone, welcome back to Somerset Place. You are seeing what used to be the Plantation's barnyard as we talk about, appropriately, the various barns and warehouses that once stood in this area. On two previous episodes linked at the end of this video, Kathy covered the famous four-story barn, but as she mentioned, it was actually one of several large barns where enslaved field hands stored cash crops and agricultural equipment. A 1791 court document lists that, quote, a large warehouse and others necessary for saving and securing the crops have been built. These were some of the earliest structures on the plantation, erected by a combination of enslaved and free laborers. 15 years later, an 1806 advertisement mentions, quote, two barns that were listed separately from the four-story barn. The 1839 inventory also documents a, quote, new barn that held 75.5 bushels of old wheat, a half barrel of pumpkin seed, 1 hogshead of molasses, 53 tubs and boxes for corn, and various farming implements. The same year this inventory was compiled, noted agriculturalist and pro-slavery advocate Edmund Ruffin visited Somerset Place and wrote that, quote, there are 3 barns, or rather houses for holding grain only. 2 of them for corn are of great size and constructed with all the care and strength of materials necessary to resist the pressure of the weight of the contents. One of these is 100 feet by 60 and 3 stories high. He also documented how enslaved persons used these buildings. Once they harvested the corn crop in late fall, enslaved field hands like Judy and Lewis loaded them onto barges in the, quote, leading ditch. This navigation ditch was 12 feet wide and almost 2 miles long, running parallel to Lake Phelps about a quarter mile from its shoreline and emptying into the transportation canal. Enslaved people flooded the leading ditch by means of another ditch that connected to the lakeshore. They closed the water gate at the end of the leading ditch and opened the gate on the lake at the head of the connecting trench. From there, Ruffin wrote that, quote, the crops of corn or wheat are brought to the barns in flatboats with comparatively little labor. However, for the most part, enslaved field hands like Ellie and Annie did not immediately shuck the corn. Most of that was done in the spring when ships arrived to purchase the grain. Now, among all the barns we've discussed, the four-story barn is the only one whose exact location is known, although Pettigrew State Park personnel estimated in 1943 that, quote, a grain storage and loading barn was located opposite and across the road from the four-story barn with its foundation straddling the canal. They stated that this barn was destroyed by fire. Park officials also claimed that, quote, 2 rows of cattle barns, each row containing about 3 buildings, were located south of the old barn and west of the firehouse. They extended to the overseer's house. We don't have any primary sources that confirm the existence of cattle barns, but we do know that in 1860 there were 52 dairy cows that produced 2,500 pounds of butter alongside 55 other cows. Enslaved pasture staff took care of the cattle herds, and they, along with enslaved domestic workers, were the only enslaved people to not receive Sundays off. From what we can tell, the barns at Somerset Place survived the Civil War, and more than one was still standing in 1873. As I mentioned in my video on Shepherd Farm, one barn was moved from the transportation canal before 1910, and beams from this barn were salvaged after it was destroyed by Hurricane Isabel in 2003. These are now on display throughout the site, and you can see these beams outside Tuesday through Saturday from 9 to 5. Also, don't forget to click that subscribe button, and thank you so much. We hope to see you soon.